Hello everyone, it's Andy from Kinder Kitchens here. We're a bespoke kitchen company in New Mills in the High Peak. If any of you guys have ever had a kitchen from us, then you'll probably know me. I'm starting a series of videos, how-to videos on trying to address some of the questions that we get asked in the shop a lot. How to adjust doors, that kind of thing, drawers, drawer fronts, and some other things I'm going to go into later. But today we're here to talk about tap valves. So I think over the last few years, or last 10 years that I've been at Kinder Kitchens, sold a hell of a lot of taps, and a hell of a lot of people have come back when the tap valve's leaking and just kind of asked how they basically go about replacing that. I have to say, we do mainly Franka taps, which is kind of I guess mid-range, which suits the kitchen product that we sell basically, which is mid-range. We're not a budget kitchen outlet, and we're not the top end either, so we're kind of halfway through. And we tried to work the product with as good a quality as it can possibly be without going berserk with the price, but and so Franka taps sit quite nicely in there, and they're quite good taps, I have to say. They don't usually get many problems other than the valves leaking, and that I think happens too often. It's something that they should have, and I've mentioned to the rep before that they should probably put a better quality valve in there. But anyway, today's about changing the valve. There's a few different types of taps out there and a few different types of valves, but today we're going to talk about monoblock taps with twin handles. So I've got a couple of examples here with me, which I'm going to show you, and I'll talk you through how to get the valve out and replace it basically. Now, when it comes to replacing a tap valve, one of the problems that you're going to have is getting the correct valve. So first of all, you need to know what tap it is that you've got, so the make and model of the tap that you've got. Now, if you bought a kitchen from Kinder Kitchens, you can get in touch with us and we would have that on file, so I'd be able to tell you that, or Rachel would be able to tell you that. But if you didn't, or you've moved into a house where the kitchen's already installed, you can either look on the kind of body of the tap, so I don't know if you can see on this one, but just there's usually some kind of branding of the type of tap, which will get you fairly close. And then once you've got that, you can take to the internet and look at the different models on Google Images, for example, until you find the tap and get yourself pretty confident which tap it is that you've got. But even at that stage, it's going to be quite difficult then to shop for a tap valve, even if you know the make and model of your tap. You're going to take to the internet and you'll notice straight away that some people are selling valves, and the image of the valve might not necessarily look like the valve that's in your tap, because there's so many people selling stuff out there and it's mislabeled or misphotographed or one thing or other, and you don't want to be buying a valve, getting the valve, having the valve sent out to your house, and then suddenly finding yourself it's the wrong valve, and it's a frustrating business. Now, it doesn't take long to get the valve out of your tap, and it's quite easy to do, as I'm going to show you in a minute. And I think it's well worth getting the valve out, taking a really good picture of the valve with your phone, then taking to the internet and just making sure that the valve on the internet looks exactly like the valve that you're looking to replace. It sounds like a pain having to take it out twice, but I think it'll save you a lot of time in the long run. So I'd definitely recommend doing this, especially since actually it's quite easy to get them out, as we're about to find out. So I'm going to show you on both of these taps because they're both a little bit different. They're both twin lever monoblock taps, as in, when I say that, there's a lever on both sides and there's just one base to the tap, so it just fits in one hole, either in your worktop or in your sink. So that's a monoblock tap, basically. That's what we're talking about there. And when you do this job, this is actually going to be fitted in your sink in your home, so it's going to be slightly different for you, but hopefully you'll be able to you do it from what I'm about to tell you. And there is absolutely no reason to take the tap off the sink at all. The job can be done absolutely fine while the tap's still attached to the sink. In fact, it's probably easier to do it while it's still attached to the sink. But the first thing that we do need to do, definitely, is turn the water off, because when we take the valve out, there's a live water supply behind there, and it's just going to make a real mess of things. So underneath your sink base, there should be either an isolator feeding your tap itself, as in the sort of pipes that go into the tap. And if that's the case, you'll need to turn the hot and the cold off, even if we're only taking one of the valves out. So make sure that you've completely turned the water off. If you've just got an isolator going to your home, and you turn that off. If you've got a combi boiler, the hot and the cold will go off at the same time, because the cold water supplies the combi, which then pumps the hot water out. So by turning the cold water off, you'll turn both off. But whatever method that you're using, make sure that the water's turned off, and when you go back to the tap and you turn both levers on, no water's coming out. And when we take the valves out in a minute, in your situation as well, all of the water that's inside the pipe, inside the swan neck and down the body and in the body of the tap, when we take the valves out, that's just going to kind of leak out, because your tap, you can't turn your tap upside down, so there's going to be water left in there. So we're just going to put a towel across the back of the sink or just around the base of the tap, just to catch that water when it comes out. It won't be under pressure, but there will be kind of sort of half a cupful of water that basically comes out. So let's just be careful about that. Okay, first things first, the valve is located just in the tap here, and it's the lever of the tap and the body of the tap is actually attached to both sides of the valve. So the valve is actually connecting these two parts together. And on some of these levers, the first job is to get the lever off. And on some of these, just on the actual end cap here, not this one, but on the end cap, sometimes there's a cap that kind of unscrews off there. And if that's the type of tap that you've got, then when you take that off, inside there you'll see a screw, which you then undo, and that takes this kind of lever off. So that's a slightly different method. You won't see quite so much on this type of tap, but on some taps definitely. But for most taps, these are actually held on by a little grub screw. So there's like a spline shaft that this slides on, and then there's a grub screw that goes into the bottom, which can be a bit tricky to find when the tap's still on your sink, but I promise you it's there. There's a little grub screw in there, and the way that we're going to get to that is, once we've turned the water off, we're going to get an Allen key. This might vary a little bit, and it's important to get the right size. So if you've just got a little kit there, you can just make sure it's a nice snug fit. And I'm just gonna zoom in, and that's just gonna go up into the bottom of there and into a grub screw. And if we just loosen that off, it shouldn't be tight at all. And we're just gonna give it a couple of turns. It doesn't need to come all the way out. So just to loosen it, a couple of turns like that is absolutely fine. If it comes all the way out, it's not a biggie. We can just screw it straight back in there again, it's no problem. But it doesn't need to come out, because it's just screwing into the side of the spline shaft and just keeping it in place. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't do any heavy work. And once we've got that loosened, this should now slide off, hopefully, without too much trouble, which it is doing, like that. And we can see the spline shaft that's on the side of the tap there, and that's the hole in where that goes on again. So that's it when it's off, and that's it as it just comes off quite easily. And we can see in the bottom now where the grub screw that we were tying it on with is. So we're going to put that to one side and have a look with what we're left with. And what we can see there stuck out the side of the tap, this kind of brass looking object here, is the tap valve itself. So that's the bit that actually controls whether the water's coming in or whether it's coming out or not. And we can turn this with our hand, just in the same way that we would turn it with the lever when that's on. And this is what's controlling whether the water comes out. And this is the thing that we need to get out, get a good photograph of it, make sure we order the right one, and then put it back in again. So we're going to use the socket to remove it. It might vary. I think this is a 17mm one, so it might vary a little bit for yours, but again, make sure you've got the right fit, and then there's no chance of it slipping off. And when you're undoing this in your house on your sink, this can be really tight. If it's come from the factory and it's the first time, it's going to be in there really, really tight. So what we don't want to do is kind of have our tap in our sink, stick this thing on there and start raunching really, really hard. Because what we do is we're trying to pull the tap over. And if we're not careful where this is mounted to the sink, if you've got a Tectonite sink or something like that, there's a chance you'll snap it, because you're putting quite a lot of force in if that's really, really tight. So whilst it's in the sink, we're going to put this on and try and unscrew it, and it's going to unscrew like a regular thread, so lefty for loosey, righty for tighty. So this handle's going to pull towards me, and at the same time I'm going to hold it with my other hand and just keep it nice and strong. So I'm resisting the force of undoing it, and you can see then it went out without too much trouble. But like I say, they can be super tight, so just be nice and careful when it's in there in your sink. Put your socket on there. Just be super careful when you're pulling in. Hold the body of the tap so you're not trying to drag the tap over at the same time and damage your sink. That's really important. But once we've got it loosened off, we can now unscrew it. And this is the moment when, if this tap had been in use, when the water's going to leak out. So make sure your towel's just in place now, and that is just an unscrewing, and we can see there's a rubber seal in there, and that's the tap valve itself. So we're doing the hot side of this tap, which is why it's red on the end to tell us that it's the hot valve. And if your tap's leaking, you won't know if it's the cold or the hot, because there's no way of knowing. By the time it's just dripping out of there, there's no way of knowing which valve it's actually passing. So you're going to be replacing them both at the same time. And of course, when you buy them, you'll get two. And we'll put the hot one back in the hot side and the cold one back in the cold side when we get it. So now we've got it out. If you're at the stage where you're just taking it out to get a photograph, you're just going to sit this thing there, take a really good picture, and then when it comes to kind of inspecting it against what you're looking for on the internet, just make a note of all these different sorts of lengths of the shaft, how many threads there are, how long that section is, kind of at the top where the lever fixes on, and all that detail. Try to get as much detail as you can. And then when you look for your valve on the internet, you can compare it to your own picture and make sure it looks as close as possible. And if there's any doubt in there, keep looking, because it's probably the wrong one. There's so many out there, and it's a frustrating job. So let's assume that we've done that, we're putting the tap valve in, we may be taking it out later again if you're taking it out for the photograph stage now. But either way, let's stick this thing back in there. So we've got our new valve, assuming that we've got a new one. This is a new one anyway. Same procedure in reverse, so that's just going to pop in there. Tightens in. Now when we tighten it back up again, it kind of goes into a rubber seal and then kind of comes to a stop. And we don't want to be over tightening it, but it does want to be snug. And the reason that we need to get it just right is because when we put the lever back on in a minute, if the spline isn't in the same place, we'll end up with, when the tap's switched off, the lever isn't quite square to the body of the tap, so it's kind of not like that, and it'll end up slightly off in exaggeration. But so we just want it just so, not tight, but it won't sort of, it's not like a jar where you can keep tightening forever. It will go tight quite quickly. So we'll just get our spanner on there, and literally as I'm doing it, you can see it virtually comes to just a stop, and that's it. A little nip from there, and that's really all this needs. There's no point in over tightening it, because you're only going to struggle to get it out again next time. So that's the valve back in place, either our new valve or our leaky valve if we just took it out for the photograph. And the next thing we're going to do is pop the lever back on again. But what we need to do is make sure that the valve itself is either in the on or the off position. In an ideal world, we want it in the off position, so that we're going to spin it, in this case, anti-clockwise, because this sort of section here turns with your hand. So we'll spin it anti-clockwise. So now when we put the lever back on, the lever is in line with the tap, because if it's not, and we put it kind of there to turn the tap on, that's going to go all the way down there, and it's not going to work properly. So we're making sure that the tap is in the off position, which is in there, and then we're setting the spline so it's nice and in line. If I can just get that nice and in line with the tap body itself. So when it goes on, it's on, and then when it comes back, it goes back to that position that it's lined up with there. So I'm going to shove it all the way on, make sure it's completely on, and then we're going to reverse what we did with the grub screw. So get your Allen key back underneath, fiddle it under. You'll have to use it this way, because when this is in the sink, there won't be room for it to go in that way. So we're sticking that under, and then we're going to tighten once, tighten twice, a little bit delicate, tighten 3 times, and then it's just beginning to nip up now, and I'm literally just with my fingers, that's all it takes, because it's not actually doing any work, the grub screw, it's just pinning it in place, and as long as that's firm and it's not going to slide off, then the job's done, and that's back on there. So that's how we take the tap valve out of this particular tap, which is a Franke tap as it happens. That's a client's tap, so I'm just going to put that there carefully. And I'm just quickly going to show you this other tap. This is actually a Rangemaster tap that was in the showroom, and it ended up downstairs. I think someone's stolen some bits off it. But the reason that I'm just going to show you this is because imagine I've taken the grub screw out already to save a little bit of time, but if we imagine we take our handle off this way, once we've undone our kind of grub screw, which is in there, and you'll notice now that there's nothing to get the socket on because I can't actually see. I can only see the very end of the tap valve. So in this case, this sort of shroud, this stainless steel cup that's over the top, which is just part of the design and the style of the tap, also has to come off. And I'm going to just use my hand like that just to loosen that off, and then I'm going to unscrew it and take it off. If that's pretty tight and you can't get it off with your hand, you'll have to use like a pair of glam pliers, but you're going to wrap some strong cloth around there so the glam pliers aren't scratching this, because it's on show in the kitchen and we don't want any scratches on there. So just be careful if that's the case, but you can probably get it off with your hands. That just unscrews and slides off, and now of course we can see, and there's different sort of styles of tap which may have something like that on, so that's basically how we would do that, and that's just why I've included this little bit into the video. Now we can put our socket onto this thing. It's the same size socket in this case, and when I unscrew that and take it off, we're basically going to see a very similar thing. Now if we had have taken a photograph of the other valve, the Franke valve, and we took a picture of the Rangemaster valve, they kind of look similar, but they won't work in each other because the threads are slightly different. There's lots of reasons why they're not quite so. This tap has a kind of threaded section there. Well, that's to hold this piece on, and the other tap didn't have a piece like this, so it won't have that threaded section on straight away. So they will be different. So it's really, really important that we do make sure we get the right valve. I'm not going to bother taking this one out because, again, you would need the towel in this case if there was water in there, because all the water's going to run out the swan neck. But it's the same principle. Sometimes the valve is just hidden under an extra piece like that, which we can just kind of screw back on again. That just needs hand tightening only. And then the same procedure when we come to that, I'm making sure we get it in the right spot so it's lined up with the tap. Screw the grub screw back in again. Hopefully you can identify your tap valve and get one from the internet and get it fitted in without too much hassle. And I hope that this has been some use to you. I am going to do some more videos, so a door straightening video, and there's another type of tap which kind of is a monoblock tap like this, but it kind of has a lever at the side which you kind of pulls out to switch it on, and then it either rolls forward or backwards depending on hot or cold. And that's a different type of valve again. So I'm going to do another video on how to get one of those off. I'm just waiting for one to come into the shop, and when I get one I'll do that film. It's worth noting that type of valve doesn't start leaking anywhere near as much as this type of valve done. This screwing type valves like this, I think are just underperformers generally for most taps. They leak too often. I think the industry needs to accept that and do something about it. But I will do a video on the other type of tap soon, and hopefully if this has been of interest to you, then you can look at that as well if need be, and some of the other videos that I'm going to do in the future. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Take care, bye bye.